Good morning. My name is John Gabriel. I'm an interviewer for the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hampton County. I'm interviewing Mr. Fielding Lee today, May 1, 2007, at the main library in downtown Cincinnati. Our camera operator today is Dennis Daly. Good morning, Mr. Lee.
Good morning.
The branch of service you were in was in the Navy. It's obvious by your cap.
Right.
You're on one of the most esteemed ships in the history of the Navy. Before we get into all that, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came to be in the Navy and where you grew up and things like that?
Okay. I grew up in San Francisco. I was born in San Francisco, and then the banks crashed, and my father had to come east to get work. And so we stayed in Chicago. And I stayed in Chicago, and for till I was about 24, I went into the Navy.
Oh, a little bit older than some of the guys.
Yeah, because I was married. I got married in 1939.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I drafted.
Okay.
I was drafted. I tried to enlist in the Air Corps, and I missed out on that, so I said, well, I'll wait until I get drafted, then if I can't get what I wanted.
Do you remember where you were when you heard about the bombing in Pearl Harbor?
Yes, I was in Chicago. I was home watching TV and got all the news.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So they called me in the draft office and said that I had to report to the recruiting office. And when I went down, they interviewed me and said I could have a choice of whatever I wanted. Army, Navy, Marines. So my dad had been in the Army and the Marines, and he said if I had to go in the Navy.
Why did he say?
He said that he thought it would be better for me with the experience that he had. So I asked if I could go in the Navy, and they said yes. So I was told to report to the train station. I forget the date. Anyway, I told my wife there wouldn't be any problem. I'd probably be seeing her off and on because I'd probably wind up at Great Lakes Naval Station just outside of Chicago. Well, I got surprised when I got to the train station. They said, "So long, boys, you'll be throwing snowballs before you know it."
Huh.
And they sent us to Farragut, Idaho.
Oh, boy. What's the Navy doing in Farragut, Idaho?
That's what they asked us when we got there. They said, "What are you guys doing here from Chicago?" There was 500 of us.
Wow.
And we at the Farragut boot camp. Well, I took all my training there. And after my training, they called me in to interview me. They said they would like to send me to a school. And they had a couple of choices. And I asked them what this rangefinder school was. And they said that you were the first to take ranges and see the enemy and help shoot them down. And I thought that was good. I said, I'd like to do that. Okay, so they sent me to a rangefinder school in San Diego.
Okay.
And there we studied all different aircraft. We had to watch films and identify aircraft in the minute second as it was flashed on the screen. And then we had to learn how to calibrate shots on a vessel.
What kind of weapons are we talking about?
5-inch guns. And we had to learn how to watch the splash of a shell. If it landed in front of the enemy vessel, we would uprange maybe 500 yards. Until we didn't see any splash and was on the opposite side of the vessel, and then we would calibrate it back 250, and so on, until we hit the ship.
Got it.
And then also, we did a lot of range finding tests on Coronado Island off of California. We were at the destroyer base in San Diego, and we had one person took our ranges as we were taking them on in the rangefinder. We would calibrate the object on a flagpole out there and line it up, and then press the dot to say you're on range. And then they would mark it down, and then they qualified us on the rangefinder like that.
Did you fire live weapons?
No, we didn't fire any weapons.
Okay.
So I graduated from rangefinder school in San Diego and was signed to the WASP.
What year, what date about time of war was this?
It was 1943. Exact date, let's see, April, May, maybe June 43. So I had to take a troop train to Boston, where the WASP was being built.
Okay.
Well, in the meantime, as long as I got good grades at school, I was able to get every other day or every other night and every weekend off. So I asked my wife if she could come out to San Diego. And it was hard to find a place there because it was so populated. And I had a friend that worked for my dad. And I called him up and he said, you're not going anyplace, you're going to stay with us. So my wife came down and we stayed there. It was wonderful. And then when I got my orders for the WASP, I asked if I could go home with my wife. And we only had money for her to go home.
How was she getting home?
On the super chief, on a train.
I see.
So I went to the Red Cross and I asked them if I could get enough money to go home on the train with my wife. And they gave me $60.
Wow.
And I sat on the train with my wife and we went home to Chicago. And because I did that, I had 5 extra days to stay home with my wife.
Great.
Then when I got to Boston, I went to the Navy reimbursement office and they gave me $160 because I was entitled to a berth.
Wow, you made out.
Yeah, so I was ahead $100. I paid the Red Cross back 60.
Good.
Yeah. So when I reported to the WASP, they were still working on it. And they had all this shipyard workers on it. And I had to do some work on there. I had to do KP. And because I was promoted, after I graduated from rangefinder school, I was promoted from second class seaman to first class seaman. And I didn't think I had to do KP. So I asked my commanding officer and he said, yes. He says, everybody has to do it. I said, well, how do you get off of it? He said, you had to be a petty officer. So I asked him how I did that, and he said, he handed me a book, and he said I had to study it and take a test for it. I said, okay, I'm going to do that.
You didn't like KP?
No. I'll tell you why I didn't like KP. The ship workers were having breakfast, and they had pancakes. And they had these drums with rubber bands on them, rubber tops on them. And when they get finished it, they hit their trays on top of there to get all the material off their tray into the garbage. And as they did that, the syrup flied all over the deck, and they were walking in it. Well, I had to clean that up. I didn't like it. So I was only on there a short time when they decided they would like to send me to radar school. So they sent me to Portland, Maine to study radar. Well, I learned all about radar, and then when I came back, the ship was christened by Eleanor Roosevelt, the president's wife. And then we went on shakedown cruise in the Atlantic, and then we came back, and then we took off for the Panama Canal. They took all the bugs out of the ship, and we started through the Panama Canal. We stopped at Panama City, and I was, I don't know if I was a petty officer then, I forget when I became a third-class petty officer. And I was assigned to the Panama police station. When we stopped at Panama City, we got leave. And I had to go around with the Panama police and pick up different sailors or whoever was in trouble, drinking and everything, and we had to pick them up.
Gosh. And
That was an experience.
I bet that was fun.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you'd rather have been with the sailors than not with the police.
Then we went through the Panama Canal, but at one section we were too big for it. We had gun wells on the side of the ship that had 40 millimeter guns, and they had to take them off so we could get through the canal.
Wow.
And we actually scraped the side.
Wow.
And we finally got through the canal, and they put the gun wells back on. And we went around to California, and we picked up a company of Marines. And I think some of our flight crew and planes. And then we headed out to the Pacific to Hawaii. We got into Pearl Harbor, and we were able to get off the ship there. And I was surprised at Pearl Harbor. It was so beautiful.
Really?
Yeah.
Was there still much damage from the bombing that you could see?
No, there wasn't any damage to Pearl Harbor at that time. Well, we didn't get to see it right away. We got off on the part where we could go to the Honolulu. But then later on, we got to see the damage of the ships out there in the bay in Pearl Harbor. But I got to visit around different places, the beach at Honolulu, Waikiki Beach. I got to visit there. There was barbed wire all along the beach there. I took pictures of that. Most of the guys went to bars and stuff, and what do you call them, brothels and stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know they had
That was
brothels.
wide open at that time.
I guess.
You could walk down the street and they were lined up all along.
Wow.
Being married, I wasn't interested. And I got me a camera and got on a bus and went around town and was taking pictures.
Neat.
And when we got back to the ship, we sailed off for the Pacific to go to war.
What kind of planes were loaded on the WASP?
The kind of planes on the ship were Dauntless Helldivers and Hellcat fighters and Dauntless Avenger torpedo planes.
I see.
So we had those three types of planes.
Was there more of one kind than another?
I think there was more Hellcats, fighter planes, than there were of Avengers and dive bombers.
Okay.
So we sailed for the Pacific War area, and we hit Eniwetok first, and the rest of the islands that I got listed there.
And when you landed on the mark, or when you went to Eniwetok, had we taken it yet, or was it an operation to take it?
No, we hadn't taken it. We were just attacking it, bombing it and stuff like that.
When was your ship first under attack?
We weren't under attack there. We didn't get under attack until we got to the Marianas.
I see. So you'd already been past Marcus Island, Wake Island, so now we're in June 1944 here, and you're in the thick of it.
Yeah.
What happened in the Marianas?
We were under air attack by Jap planes, all kinds of dive bombers and fighters and torpedo planes.
Did you ever get hit?
No, we never got hit. I think a few Marines were killed. They were along the deck firing 50 caliber machine guns and 40-meter aircraft guns, quad 40s. But we didn't get any bomb hits or anything like that.
When the ship would come under attack, what was your battle station? What did you do?
I was in the after gun director. We had 6 men in there. There was a pointer that guided our director, and then there was an elevator. He ran the wheels for elevation, and then we had an officer, a lieutenant, and he manned a sort of a director, like a gun. He just aimed at wherever the aircraft were or ships were, you know. He would guide the director real fast or real slow. And then once our trainers were on, he held us there, and the elevator, he guided us up and down.
I see.
And then we had a rangefinder operator who looked in the rangefinder, and I was his second, and I had sound-powered telephones on, and with a telephone, and given the ranges and the target angles.
I see.
Then we had another man, he was a radar operator. Well, at that time, the radar wasn't any good. He would operate the radar and find out he was in the water. He would get a pip on the screen, and by the time he looked at it and tried to see if it moved, it was too late. The aircraft would be on us, you know.
Oh, boy.
So we had to rely on the rangefinder altogether.
Did every gun station have the same type of crew and the same reliance on the rangefinder?
Just the main battery guns, the 5-inch guns.
Okay.
There was a forward director and an after director.
Okay.
We had 2 gun directors and aft. There were twins on each one. That we
Twin 5-inch guns?
twin 5-inch guns on 2 gun directors.
Okay.
So that was 4 guns altogether. And our director would send signals down to the plotting room. And the wind speed would go in there, and I would give the target angle and the ranges. And the own ship speed would go into that plotting room. And the enemy speed. And the guns, all that would go up to the guns and would go into the gun director. And they would use that for firing.
I see.
Now, in the rangefinder, we could see the gun burst. On the 5-inch guns, they would make a black burst
Oh, up in the air.
up in the air. And the rangefinder would run his dial so the range would go back or forward to move the burst of the guns further or shorter.
Okay.
And on the other guns, all they would do is follow, what would they call it? They would see a gun flash like that. They wouldn't see bursts like the 5-inch
Oh,
guns.
so it's sort of the tracers?
Tracers,
Okay.
yeah. Just the 5-inch guns had gun bursts.
So when you were under attack, was it sometimes single planes or was it formations of planes?
Formations of planes.
Really?
Believe me, they'd come from all over.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Flying off of Tinian and Guam, Saipan to attack you? Or?
Yeah,
I see.
yeah. And it was hard for our Navy because we couldn't catch the Jap fleet. The Jap fleet aircraft carriers had an advantage on us because they would land on their islands and gas up and be able to come after us.
Yeah.
And we couldn't go after them because we couldn't reach them because they were too far away. So they had that advantage.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So,
Well, while you were on the Marianas, your fighters were involved in the famous turkey shoot.
the Marianas was amazing. Our carrier planes were coming back overjoyed. They were shooting down Jap planes, one right after another. Our pilots were holding up their fingers like shooting down 3 or 4 planes.
Wow.
And they couldn't wait to be loaded with more ammunition to go up again and fire.
Wow. Wow. Do you have any idea how many planes your fighters brought down during that time?
No, I don't, but we have a complete record of how many planes.
I read in the synopsis of that blue pamphlet there that the WASP, the gunners on the WASP shot down 16 enemy aircraft.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Daly mentioned that you were involved in some of that. Can you tell us about that?
Well, that was later on, when we got close to Japan, they started using kamikazes. And I think we were the only carrier to shoot down 2 kamikazes.
Really?
Because carriers didn't get to shoot too many planes because the planes had to come over destroyers and cruisers and battleships and everything before they could get to a carrier. We were well protected.
Yeah.
Because we had a lot of ammunition on there, bombs, torpedoes, rockets,
Yeah.
gas, and everything. In fact, when we were under attack, we had belly tanks that we put on our planes that we shoved overboard because they were sitting on the flight deck. And if if any of those tanks got hit, all that gasoline would go up in flames and it'd be a big explosion. So as soon as there was an attack come, all that stuff went overboard.
That'd be fun. I never knew that.
People back home couldn't get gasoline, they were on ration, and that's one of the reasons why.
Yeah.
Well, later on, kamikaze, our after director, shot down 2 kamikaze planes, and we were, my commanding officer put us in for there were 6 of us in this gun director. He put us in for a Bronze Star.
Neat.
Because we saved our ship.
You were the target of these kamikazes, no doubt, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought so.
But evidently, we didn't get it. I guess the captain didn't think that that was deserving of a Bronze Star. So he wrote up a citation for us.
Did any of them ever get through and hit you? Kamikazes, that?
No.
Good, good.
But I saw them coming at me.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
Were they coming in waves also, or singles?
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
What about the fighter planes? Did they get up and take care of them too?
They tried, yeah. We had to be very careful of our planes.
Yeah.
That's why, the reason why we did that plane sighting at rangefinder school, so we know right away which planes were which.
That makes sense.
Yeah. A carrier was never a dull moment. When we weren't in battle and we had air practice, they called flight practice,
Yeah.
all aviators came up to fly planes. If we weren't busy, we would dash up to the flight deck to watch because it was amazing. Planes would they would not have enough power on takeoff and they would drop in the ocean.
Oh my gosh.
And when they were coming in on landing, the man on the edge of the carrier, he had these flags.
Yeah, I've seen
And he would guide them, their wings, so that they would come in for a perfect landing. Well, when they weren't right, he would wave them off. And sometimes they wouldn't have enough power to take off, and they would hit into our gun wells.
Oh my God.
And crash. Well, when you were in the battle area like that, they didn't have time to fix those planes. They would bring out these big trucks that haul those planes back on a flight deck and get them in an area where we would dump them overboard.
Oh, I see.
So we lost a lot of planes like that.
Did you lose any pilots like that?
No, we didn't lose any pilots like that.
I mean, you mentioned the planes without enough power going off the end of it.
They'd go off the end of the ship, but the plane would be stuck there. We'd have to get the pilot out.
Oh, I see.
But one time, they had these wires, cables in the deck that the hooks on the planes would hook onto.
Mm-hmm.
And
As they're landing?
yeah, as they were landing. And sometimes the pilots would overshoot that and their hooks wouldn't get there. And they had these other cables that would go up as high as the props.
I never knew about that.
So when they didn't catch in the deck, they hit these props, and the planes would go up on their nose, and the props would dig into the flight deck
Huh.
and bend the props all to heck, and that would save the plane. Well, sometimes when the planes landed, they were taxied all up front. You would maybe have 20 planes up there with their wings folded and all jammed together.
Mm-hmm.
One time this plane came in, he missed his hook, and he landed like a jackrabbit. He jumped over the cables and rammed into the planes up forward. That created a monstrous mess.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
How many planes were damaged there?
quite a few planes were damaged.
Would these carrier pilots, the torpedo bombers or the dive bombers, would they re-land carrying their bomb loads if they went out and didn't see anything to come back carrying all that stuff? Oh boy, that sounds dangerous.
Yeah, it was very dangerous. One thing I give credit to is fantastic pilots were night pilots. I couldn't believe it. There was only certain pilots that flew at night. Everybody couldn't fly at night and land on a carrier at night.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They had always had somebody up in the air flying around for protection or, you know, and they would have to fly. They had lights on the flight deck, but there was cover over them. They were slanted that you could only see the light when you were coming in on the carrier to land. You couldn't see it from above. But I give a lot of credit to those guys.
Yeah, if the ship is going like this in the water.
Yeah, and those guys are landing at night. That was something.
That is something.
Yeah.
Did you know any of the pilots?
No, I met a couple of them. I never was friends with anybody. But I was, when we weren't in battle, we were at different islands like Palau or someplace like that. We were loading up with ammunition, and I wouldn't have anything to do. A lot of times you had work to do when you weren't busy fighting. But I was off duty at this time, and I was sunbathing on the flight deck. A lot of guys did that a lot. And a couple of pilots were out there too. And I got talking to them, and they found out I was a rangefinder operator. And they asking me questions about what would be the hardest for me to range on a pilot on a plane. And I told them, diving. If you're coming in on an angle, we can get you, line you up real easy and knock you down. But if you get above us and dive on us, it is hard as heck to get you.
That's good information for them to have when they're in the attack.
Yeah, they like that information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you should have taught a class to the whole squad.
I think they probably do that. I don't know.
Well, give you some.
Anyway.
So after the Marianas operation was over, you went on to Palau and the Philippines. Tell us about it looks to me like you had a Japanese fleet encounter in the Philippines.
Oh, the Philippine sea battle was terrible. They hit us with everything. They were coming from the Philippines and the fleet, everything.
Wow. Wow. Did you have any surface contact with them?
We lost ships there, and it was terrible.
Was it a day battle or a night battle?
Day battle, night, everything.
Oh, he done.
It was one of the biggest battles we were ever in.
Wow. How far reaching was it? If you sat on the carrier, you could see fighting going on all around you?
No.
No.
No. We couldn't see their fleet. The only thing we could see was their planes coming in at us.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Our big battleships might have been firing 16-inch guns at their fleet or something like that. But we had a lot of air battle.
Were you in that fleet there? You weren't the only carrier. How many other carriers were there?
Oh no, there was the Ranger, there was the Enterprise, there was a Saratoga, there was a Franklin, there was a Hornet.
See, all these carriers took a lot of battles.
All these were big carriers.
Yeah.
Then there were small carriers. They called them escort carriers. They didn't have as many guns as us in that. They more or less supplied us when we lost planes. They more or less supplied us with more planes.
I see. I know that when you got up to Iwo Jima, the Franklin took a couple of good hits up there. They took some.
When we got up to Formosa and Kyushu, that was terrible. We got our planes off. By the way, I had a berth on my carrier we had 2 signals. One was submarine call and one was air attack. A big sound was made around the ship, like a gong or a siren. The siren was submarine and gong, 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 gong was air attack. Well, if you can believe it, my sack was right above the torpedo storeroom.
Oh.
There was 58 torpedoes stored underneath my berth.
Oh. Wow.
So when I heard that submarine attack, I was out
No doubt.
there in a hurry. Because my battle station was at the top of the ship. That's where the radar was and everything. That's why they tried to kamikaze it. They wanted to put all that out. The directors controlled the big guns and all that, so they wanted to knock that all out. Our directors were protected with, I think, thick 3 inches of metal.
Wow.
Well protected.
Oh, you know, since you're talking about your birth and things like that, tell us about daily life on board the carrier. How many guys were, you know, where you slept, how you...
There was 25 personnel on the carrier, 2,500 personnel on the carrier.
Wow.
Yeah. And we had our jobs to do when we weren't in battle. One time I had to go around and check the firing mechanism on the 5-inch guns. We had to go into the gun turret and make sure that the firing mechanism was working correctly. You were assigned to different departments in the fire control department, maybe a month or so at each department. The next department I worked in was sound powered telephones. They were telephones that you put on, and your speaker had a button that you push down when you wanted to speak. And the sound of your voice made a vibration inside that carried your sound through these wires to another outlet where they would hear you.
I see.
There was no air like a telephone, so Japs could never pick us up on the telephone.
I see.
So they were called sound-powered telephones. We had a workshop where they broke down, wires got loose, and we had to repair them and stuff like that. Then we had a workshop where we had a big oven, and we used this oven. If you were assigned to the workshop, you had to go around to all the guns that had gun sights on them. Your 40-meter guns had a gun sight. And you had an operator that operated the gun sight for these 40-meter guns, and they had men on them to load the shells, but the fire controlman, he operated he had the straps on his shoulder, and he moved it around this gun sight, and he looked in there. Well, the gun sight was in a window, and the window would get foggy from the moisture of the ocean. And in there was a tube of silicone, and the silicone was inside this tube, and you would have to open it up and pull it out and check it to see if it was pink or blue. If it was blue, it was still good. If it was pink, it was full of moisture, and you had to replace it. So you keep the moisture out of the gun sight. And what we would do, we would take these silicone tubes down to the fire control room and put them in the oven and dry them out and reuse them.
Good idea, resourceful idea.
Yeah. Then I got assigned to the plotting room. That place I couldn't believe. It had a board, I think it was maybe, let's see, I don't know how far up I can reach. I'm pretty close to 5'11", and over 6 feet, I had to reach up. This board had dials on it. It might have been 20 feet long, 10 feet high. And these dials were all along this board, and you had to learn how to operate this. And I thought to myself, no way. No way, you had to know which dial was this gun, and which dial was for this and that. And all that kind of stuff. And I couldn't believe it. Finally, after working and working and working, you were able to dash over there and move all these dials off just automatically. Wow. Then they had, we called it the computer room, or the plot room, but they had these gyros, and you had to learn how to operate those. You put in, they had dials to put in the target angle, and dials to put in the wind speed, and dials to put in the own ship speed, and all that went up and up to the guns. So the guns would automatically get all that information to fire.
Wow, wow.
So
when you see a whole a turret with the guns in it turn and fire, all that information is automatically processed. There's not a guy saying, well, just point it over there.
No.
It's all
that information is sent down from our gun director, sent down to the plotting room, and these guys are all moving dials and putting it in this computer to send up to the guns. And the guns would automatically respond to the elevation and the training and everything.
Wow. Sounds like a very accurate system.
Yeah. So our jobs, in case one of us got hurt or killed or something, we could be replaced on any of these jobs.
Mm-hmm. That's smart. You wear a lot of hats on that ship, huh? Well, what about during the day? Did you have chow 3 times a day? Did you get a lot of mail? How was the food?
Mail came, it took forever to get mail. Sometimes I would get a stack 10 inches high.
Wow.
And I would have to sort it out and put all the dates from my wife to get my information right. And it was hard to write home. And my wife would get letters the same way, stacks of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
well, she could follow what you were doing by the news. I'm sure the carrier news was big news back then.
yeah.
But you're always in combat. You had to be worried constantly.
Right. Right. We ordinarily got 3 meals a day, and the chow wasn't that good. Milk was powdered, and eggs were powdered, and the bread, we had to put the bread up to the light because it had bugs in it. And when you put it up to the light, you'd see a big black thing, and you knew it had a bug, and you'd toss it.
Oh, gosh.
But once in a while, when we got in the port where they had taken an island and we were getting the CVs had set up refrigeration and stuff like that, why we were getting supplies. We maybe got sunny side up eggs, and that was a treat.
That sounds great.
Yeah, and maybe real milk and stuff like that.
Did you have any good ports of call during the war?
I can't remember too much of any good ports. The word got out that we were going to hit Japan, and we were headed to New Guinea.
Huh.
that was way down below the equator. And while we were down there, it was miserably hot. I mean, it was hot. We didn't get to go any place. We were there for quite a while, and because we were there so long, the fleet decided to have a basketball tournament. And they made basketball courts on the carriers on the hangar decks. And I was on the WASP basketball team.
Great, great.
And we only got to play maybe 5 minutes, and we couldn't even hold the ball. We were so soaking wet.
Oh.
We would come out and stand on the sidelines and dry ourselves off with Turkish towels. But anyway, it was a lot of fun.
That's a good way to pass it.
They had footballs and volleyballs, and on the flight deck they would set up a volleyball net, and they would play tag football and play volleyball up there. We had a lot of exercise while we were in port.
You hear these old sailors talk about they always had a boxing team. Or,
Yeah.
You had that too?
Yeah, we had a boxing team.
How about that?
Yeah.
Good fight on the ship?
They had a wonderful place on the hangar deck because they had an elevator in the center of the ship. They put it halfway down and set up chairs on the hangar deck, and we had a boxing ring on the elevator.
Neat.
Yeah.
That's
And another thing, they had elevators on the deck side. And they would lower them, and we could dive and swim off of there. But we had to be careful, so they assigned Marines with rifles in case of sharks.
Did you ever see the shark?
Yeah, I saw sharks.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
Huh.
But that was quite an experience.
Did you always have a contingent of Marines on board?
Beg pardon?
Was there always a unit of Marines on board?
We always had a company of Marines.
No,
Always. And we felt sorry for them because they always had to get out on the flight deck when we weren't in battle and march and do drills with their guns and everything.
Yeah.
So-
Tell me what it's like here. You saw action off practically every island that anyone would ever recall, throughout the war as being a big operation. Okinawa, Iwo Jima, the Philippines, the Marshall Islands, Wake Island, Marion. You've seen.
Well, where I left off was, I told you about the Philippine Sea battle. That was one of the biggest battles we were ever in. We lost a lot of ships there. We lost the Princeton there. Then we got up to Japan after we left New Guinea. We went up to Japan, and we hit Formosa. We were at the China Sea. At that, it wasn't Vietnam at that time. It was Indochina. We hit that.
Wow.
We hit Kyushu. Kyushu is when we got hit with a bomb.
What kind of plane dropped the bomb?
It was, I think they called it a Yak. It was a dive bomber. It came straight out of the sky and hit us in the middle of the deck.
Wow.
It went 3 decks down below and then exploded. It was armor piercing. Well, we were lucky. We had gotten we were in battle all this time, and we had gotten all our flight planes off the carrier. The dive bombers, the fighters, and the torpedo planes were all up in the air. But the carrier next to us, the Franklin, they hadn't got their flight crew off yet. And they got hit right in the middle of the planes on the flight deck.
Oh boy.
And we couldn't believe it, we could see it. There was 30 explosions on the Franklin. It blew up everything.
Wow.
All the planes had gas, rockets, bombs, everything.
Wow.
It was the worst naval disaster in history, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
How far away was it from you?
Well, we were over here, and then there was a battleship and a cruiser and another cruiser and destroyers and then a battleship and more destroyers. And then that was the carrier next to us.
I see.
Yeah. So the damage down below was terrible. Some of my rangefinder fire controlmen were down in that workshop I explained to you. They had to try to run out of there, and as they were running out of there, the paint on the carrier was melting.
Wow.
And flowing down on the deck, and they were slipping and falling in this bubbling paint, and they wound up in the hospital with terrific burns.
Oh boy.
But the bomb, when it exploded down below, it got the whole mess hall and blew up all the steam pipes, exploded, and steam pipes, steam was all over, and the water down there was, I don't know how deep it was, but parts of bodies was all over the place. And we didn't get to see this until after we secured from battle, because we were battle all night. We didn't get nothing to eat until somebody sent up some boxes, they called them K-rations. So we were up there trying to eat that in between battle and all that. And when we secured, when the battle was all over, we went down below and we just couldn't believe it. All we could do was smell burnt flesh all throughout the ship.
Took a lot of casualties.
And a lot of casualties. I think there was 120 killed.
Wow.
And the bodies, pieces of bodies, everybody had to chip in and help with picking up parts and put them in trash cans. I guess they were like garbage cans. We didn't know who was who. They had to put them in there until they could put them in body bags. After everything was kind of cleaned up, there was a burial ceremony at the rear of the ship. We all got dressed in our dress whites, and we had a real nice ceremony for the dead. All these garbage cans of body parts were taken and put in body bags, and they would put a big star shell. It was as big as like a 5-inch shell. They would put that in there so it would go to the bottom of the ocean. And in the ceremony, we had a bugler and officers and everything, and we had this big box with an American flag draped over it, and it was slanted towards the ocean, and these body bags were lifted up and pushed down this slide and dumped in the ocean. And I guess that's when their relations and relatives were notified that they were missing in battle because they didn't have any remains. And we couldn't take the remains home because there was no place to put that. Had to be put in refrigeration if you wanted to keep it. So that was how they were buried at sea.
That's a lot of guys to bury. 120 guys.
Yeah. So it was decided that after the battle, they decided that the WASP was in good enough shape that we had a few planes that we could use on the hangar deck and the flight deck. The hole was only about this big in the flight deck where the bomb went through.
I was gonna ask how the planes who were out got home, but apparently
Yeah.
they could get home.
So they took a metal sheet and they covered that hole. And they decided they were going to use the WASP to give the Franklin protection home because there was no way they could protect themselves. So we turned around and went back to Hawaii, and they thought that they would be able to repair us in dry dock in Hawaii. And we took the Franklin back to Pearl Harbor, give it air protection so they wouldn't sink it. And we got it back safely, and I got to see it. It was a massive melted steel for about 5 decks.
Wow.
It was just amazing.
Was that just hit by one bomb too? Or,
As far as I know,
boy, that was a devastating.
oh, it was terrible. So we got off the ship at that time. We were only there, I forget how long, until they examined us. They brought in a wrecking crew on, and they said that we were damaged too much. The damage was so terrific that they said that there's no way they could repair us in Pearl Harbor. So I never knew what happened to the Franklin till after the war. I knew that they brought it back through the canal to New York, I believe, to sell war bonds.
Wow.
That was something that the civilian population could see what was going on, and it was an attraction to really get the people to buy war bonds to help in the war.
Wow.
So I guess that was the last time I saw the Franklin. We went on to California. Like you asked me if I ever saw my dad, and we pulled into where the Queen Mary's
Long Beach.
Long Beach. We pulled into Long Beach, and where I got sick, I got a real bad cold and fever, and I had over 100 fever. They wouldn't let me off the ship to see my dad. So I guess we were only there a day or something, and we took off and we went up to Bremerton, Washington. And we pulled into Puget Sound. And I think that's where I did one of the hardest days work I ever did in my life. Everybody had to come up and unload the ammunition off the ship.
Oh boy.
And that meant bombs, rockets, torpedoes, everything had to come off of that ship. And they didn't care who you were. You had to be on the work detail day and night, all night. We had to take ammunition off of that ship so the shipyard workers could work with their torches.
Oh boy.
So we had slides. I worked out in the bomb storeroom. I couldn't believe what was going on. I thought, oh my God. This is the first time I saw how they loaded these bombs. They had tracks in the ceiling where these bombs rided rails. They had a hook on the bomb, and they hook it onto a chain and hook it onto this railing along the ceiling, or the ceiling, pardon me, they call it overhead. Didn't call it. The walls were bulkheads and the ceilings were overheads. The decks were decks and the stairs were ladders. So I'm watching these guys load these bombs on these chains, and they're hollering, "Here comes another one!" And they take this bomb and boom! And that bomb goes flying on that track to a loading zone. I couldn't believe it.
Who stops it at the other end?
Somebody stopped at the other end, and then they hoisted it up, and elevator or whatever, and got it up to the top side and down the chute to the barges, and they were loaded on barges and taken ashore. But boy, I'll never forget that. Well, then they decided that the ship was going to be in dry dock a long time. So we hadn't been home, I guess, in 2 years or something, and they decided to let us have leave. So they could only let the port side of the ship off first and the starboard side second. So if you were in the starboard side, you didn't get to home. You had to stay aboard ship, so they had some crew on there to work the ship. Mm-hmm. Well, I was in starboard side, so I had to wait. And each crew got 24 days leave.
Wow.
That was fantastic. So while I was aboard ship, I had to work around there. In the meantime, I got off to go ashore into Seattle, and I would be able to call my wife and talk to her. But that was hectic trying to wait to go home.
Yeah.
She couldn't get there. I just had to get enough money for airfare to fly home. Excuse me. After 24 days, I didn't want to tell my wife that we got bombed. I didn't tell her on the telephone what happened or something. I said we had to come home. Ship needed a few repairs, that's all.
Carrying on with Mr. Lee, change tapes here, the story continues.
Okay, well, I got home. You can imagine how glad I was to see my wife. And I enjoyed my 24 days leaving home and saw all my friends and relations. But I was dumbfounded when I heard that my wife knew that the ship had been bombed because it was in all the papers.
Oh boy.
And my sister-in-law had even cut the headlines out of the paper and given it to my wife. So I was kind of surprised at that. But anyway, I had a very nice time at home. When I got orders, I had to leave to come back.
What date was this approximately when you got this leave?
I think it was September, and I had to go back in August, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when I got back on board ship, the ship was ready to leave for action. And we had noticed that we had a lot of new material, including radar. They had come up with some new radar, and they put it on our ship, which was very good for our guns. They had a lobing screen that vibrated back and forth that kept our radar on target more and didn't reflect into the ocean. The beams would bounce off of the target better than it did the first time we were at war. So when we went back out, we hit Japan a lot. We're in a lot more battles, air battles, off of Guam and Iwo Jima in Japan. And
Were you seeing more kamikazes at this time?
at this time is when we really got kamikazes. They were hitting everything. And then we got in a typhoon off of Okinawa. And I was on watch at my battle station. My watch in the battle station at this time was in the forward gun director. And I could see the forward part of the carrier. And these waves were coming up, and the aircraft, they couldn't get all the aircraft down below into the hangar deck. They had it cabled down, the aircraft was cabled to the flight deck. And these waves were so enormous, they swept the aircraft off of the flight deck.
Wow.
And the typhoon was so strong that it tore 30 feet off the bow of our carrier.
Wow.
And I was up top watching this. And I was praying that our ship would survive.
Wow.
I never thought we would survive this.
Some ships did they?
We lost 3 destroyers that turned right over and sunk. That's how terrific the typhoon was.
Wow. Wow. How long did it last?
I can't recall the last, it seemed like forever. But we stayed and fought until the end. And we were off with Japan at the end of the war. And I'll never forget what I saw at the surrender. The whole fleet came together, and the British fleet. And we were all gathered around the Missouri, the big battleship where the Japanese surrendered. And I could look out over the top and could see the whole fleet. I couldn't believe how many ships there were. The ocean was just covered.
Wow.
And they asked for volunteers to go in to Japan for the surrender, because we didn't have enough army there where the surrenders happened so fast. Most of the army was in the Philippines. So I went down to offer to go in and volunteered us for the surrender. And you had to get a cholera shot and stuff like that to go ashore into Japan. But when they found out I was married, they wouldn't let me go. They would only allow single men to go. Well, eventually, they found out they were able to get enough Army and Marines to gather together that's all they took. They didn't take any Navy men. They took the whole company off our ship of Marines. They took those. They went in. And that was it, the whole surrender. And we came back, after the war was over, we came back through the Panama Canal again.
Oh boy.
And at that time I was amazed. I saw a movie star. I saw Romero.
Cesar Romero.
Cesar Romero. He was in the Navy, and I got to meet him. He was on another ship going through the canal. And we came around through the canal and came home to New York and arrived there on Navy Day and had a big celebration.
Great.
Yeah.
When did you get to go home from that?
I was one of the first ones to go home because I was married and had a battle experience, and I was never so glad to go home. But when I got home, I heard from some of my buddies that I was kind of disappointed because they took everything off of the WASP, and they brought these camp little beds. We call them cots. They brought them and put them all over the hangar deck and all over the flight deck, and they went across the Atlantic to London and picked up Army, and they went to Naples, Italy, and all my buddies got to see it over there, and was telling me how great it was.
Oh, yeah.
They picked up all the servicemen up there and brought them back on carriers because they didn't have enough troop ships.
Wow, wow.
So I saw some of my buddies after the war, and they were telling me all about
You stay in contact with the veterans from the war?
it. Yeah, I did stay in contact with some buddies.
Is there still an organization today?
There is an organization, but it's more pilots.
Oh, okay. Tailworkers.
Yeah, the WASP, the USS WASP, still has a reunion. And in fact, one of my buddies called me up from Michigan, and I couldn't believe it. I answered the phone, and he said he wanted to go pick me up and go to the WASP reunion. They built a new WASP in Mobile, Alabama. And he wanted to go to the ceremony. But I couldn't make it. I had a date or something.
Well, what did you do after the war?
After the war, I learned a lot of electric when I was in the Navy. In fact, my chief sent me down one time to, we wanted to hook up a gun to another director, and he asked me to go down and wire up this gun, and the wires had to be pulled down through to the storeroom down on the flight deck. There was a terminal box down there, and I had to use a pair of French phones. You hook them up to the wire, and you can talk to them way up above where they're trying to put the wire down. Well, when I got down there, this terminal box is up in this overhead, and I had to climb up these metal shelves and lie on my back on this metal shelf and pull this wire through and hook it up to this terminal box there. So I would use this French phone and find out if the juice was off on these certain wires.
Oh, gosh.
And I grabbed this one wire, and it was hot. And I'm sweating, I'm lying on this metal shelf, and it almost blew me to pieces. I said, oh my God. So I got the shock of my life. And then another time, when we were up close to Japan, the chief said to me, he said, Lee, oh, by the way, if you want to get a promotion, they have a book about this thick. You got to study it, you have to take a test, and before you can be promoted. Well, I started out an apprentice seaman. Boot camp, I went to first class seaman. Rangefinder school, I went to second class seaman. No, I went from second class to first class. And then I went to third class petty officer when I studied the book and I took the test. And while at sea, I took second class petty officer and I passed this test. So I was a second class petty officer when I came out. Well, the chief got a hold of me and he said, "You're going to have to go up to the gun directors because we're headed up to Japan and we don't know how the defrosters or the heaters work because we're going to be up there in the cold. But," he says, "I want you to be very careful because that is 550, not 220, 550. So be careful what you're doing." So I went up there, and naturally the gun directors are all steel. You're sitting on steel, and everything you're handling is steel. So I took the covers off and checked out, made sure the fuses are all okay, and the heaters are working, the defrosters are working, and everything went fine. And I went all the way down and told them everything was great. So when I came out of the service, I considered an electrician, you know, but I was a printer before I went in there. And I thought, well, I don't know. I don't think I want to go back to LA. I had too many rough experiences. I think I'll go back to my printing. So I went back to where I left off. Went back to my job. And I worked there a while, and I couldn't see myself being promoted. So I inquired about a job I had heard of. So I went over there for an interview, and I happened to be lucky. The superintendent of printing there was an ex-Navy man. He was an ex-Navy commander. And he said to me, "You were in the Navy?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he kind of took a liking to me. He says, "We want to hire you." He says, "We want you to work, you'll have to work Saturday and Sunday." I said, "What?" He said, "Well, we're very busy, and we're a lot of overtime." And he said, "If we can't work Saturday and Sunday, we can't use you." I said, "Well, Saturday," I said, "but Sunday, like one day off a week." I said, "Well, I'll try the job." So I took the job, and I started out as, you have to, I was union, and you have to start out at the low level and work your way up. Well, I was an apprentice printer, and they wanted me to do some extra harder work, and they thought I could do it. And I started doing it, and they were real happy with my work. So this boss I had, he couldn't put me up there because they were union. So he called the union in. And he called him into the shop, and he told him, he said, "We want this man to do this work. He's very good at it, and we think we want to promote him to a journeyman." So they said, "Well, that's unusual, but we'll let you try it." So they did. They put me on that job, and I seemed to handle it all right. So I went from there. I was there, let's see, I think I started there in, I came out of war 45. went back to work. I was there at my old company 2 years, and I started at this new company 47. I was there maybe 5 years, not even that, 4 years. And I got promoted all the way up to the highest job. I was working two-color work, which is about the best you could do at the time I was there. I put in a lot of overtime, but I didn't hardly work any Sundays. But I made a lot of money there. But I wanted to quit working labor. I saw an ad in the paper for a chance to be a plant superintendent. So I saw this ad in the paper, and I answered the ad. And I told them what I could do. And they wanted me to fly down right away. And I said, no, I can't. I said, I got a job here. I said, I can fly down on maybe the weekend. So I forget, that was a Monday or something. And all of a sudden I got a call from Cincinnati saying that we got so many ads to this job. By the way, I wasn't making that much money, but this was 5 figures at the time. This is 1952, 5-figure salary. They said, we got so many ads, we're flying up to Chicago for interviews. They said, if you want to, we'll interview you at the Palmer House in downtown Chicago on Sunday. I said, okay. They said, it'll be there Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Well, I guess I was the last interview. They interviewed Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I went down for my interview. And Sunday night, they called me up, and they wanted to know if they could come out to my place. I had an apartment there at the time. And talk to my wife and meet my family. I had 2 children. I said, yeah. They said, you're number 1 on the list. We'd like you to take the job. So they came out and they talked to my wife, and we agreed I'd try it. So I quit by the way, this boss, there was a Navy man, he was so good to me. He didn't want me to get fouled up. So he inquired with, who is it, Dunn and Bradley?
Down Bradstreet, yeah.
Yeah. He inquired about this company that I was going to go to work for and make sure I was getting into a good job.
That's good.
And they had a good record.
Good.
And he let me know about it. So I went down there. They were doing printing for Champion Paper Company in Hamilton. This work had to be the top of the line. It was 4-color work. And it had to be the best you could get. They evidently couldn't get somebody in Cincinnati to do this work, and they inquired up in Chicago to get it. So I was doing all the fine printing for these printing magazines that Hamilton Company sent around the whole country. And they had to take magnifying glasses to check the work. It had to be perfect. In fact, one job I did for one magazine, my boss was just amazed at the picture. It was a picture of a plaid material. And they took the plaid material and held it up to the picture, and it looked like the same thing. So they made a big deal out of this somehow or other. And So I stayed with that company for 29 years.
Wow.
I stayed down here in 1952, and I've been here ever since. I really enjoyed Cincinnati, and I liked it. I thought it was a nice place to raise my children. And I retired from that company, and I think it was 81.
Great.
Yeah. In fact, we had, the company was down here in the Pew Building,
I don't know which is the Pew Building.
down off of Lytle Place.
American Book Building?
Yeah,
Yeah.
near American Building,
Okay.
near American Building. My boss was very good friends of the public library.
Huh.
Whoever was in charge here, some woman, I forget her name. But they wanted me to print a book for this library. It's in a case here in the main library downtown. It's a book on veterans, their names. They turn the pages over every once in a while. They open this glass case. Well, I printed that book. I hand printed that book.
I'd like to see that sometime.
So that's about it.
Well, that was that. I've done a bunch of these interviews. That was the best interview I've ever done.
Is that right?
I really appreciated your time and thank you for the service to your country.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for remembering me.